Okay, welcome back, everybody. Last episode, we talked about nursing home costs in Florida and how to protect your assets from them. Today, we're going to get more into that subject and cover some of the mistakes that our expert here, Cary Moss, has seen people make, some of the risks of trying to do this yourself, do some of this planning yourself. Share some examples that she has encountered in her career. And also talk a little bit more about how to coordinate Medicaid planning with the rest of your estate plan. And we'll try to wrap up the episode with some advice on how to get this conversation started in your family, whether it's between spouses or children to the adult children to the parents. So welcome back, Cary.
Thank you.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, wonderful.
Good.
So let's hear some mistakes that you've seen people make when trying to protect assets on their own, maybe before they talked to an attorney.
So oftentimes I have families come in here, and or the spouse of their loved one that needs long-term care, and they've already started giving away assets in order to protect them, hide them, whatever word you want to use there. But um, so they've already created these transfers that's going to be a problem for purposes of Medicaid eligibility, especially if we have a crisis situation. Because again, Medicaid looks back 5 years to see if there's been any gifts or transfers to others. And so when they've done that, we can reverse that transfer, assuming that the person they gave it to still has the money, right? So if I'm going to give I'm worried that my husband needs long-term care, and I give my kids, $50,000 each and say, put this aside just so I want to make sure I can protect it. Well, great. If I then, I'm going to be applying for Medicaid for my husband, and those are going to create an issue, a period of ineligibility. Well, as my lawyer might say, get the money back from them. Well, if I go to my younger son and say, hey, I need this money back, it may be long gone, and he's not going to have his own assets to be able to reverse that transfer. So that's a big issue. The other thing is people will private pay for quite some time, not realizing that there's options.
Mm.
They had no idea that there's this world of Medicaid planning. And so they've continued on for a year or 2 years. In fact, I had a client that paid for 18 months for their mom for Medicaid. And by the time they came to me, by the time they heard through the grapevine, like go see Cary, when they came in, I mean, they had about $50,000 left.
Mm.
And, I can still do some planning, but I'm not as good as I would have been had they come to see me those 18 months prior. So I think just not knowing and just, kind of blazing through that money in private pay. And I think one that I often hear from a married couple standpoint is the spouse coming to me saying, hey, I think I need to file for divorce so
Mhm.
I can protect the assets. And that is just absolutely not the case. Again, that may be true in other states, but
Mhm.
here in Florida, it is absolutely not necessary to pursue that divorce. I would say, 9.9 times out of 10.
How do
Mhm.
you recommend seniors and their adult children potentially start this conversation without causing conflict or panic?
Well, I think you start with the underlying idea that most people, especially this older generation, they have obviously worked very hard. They've paid into the system. They've been very frugal. They've lived within their means. And they have a true desire to want to pass on those, funds that they've accumulated, the wealth that they've accumulated, the assets. They want to be able to pass that on to their family as a legacy. So, from the standpoint, I think it's an easy conversation to have with the seniors because they're like, I really want to make sure I can pass something on to my kids and my grandkids. Um, and and so it's starting with that premise of, you know, are you, we obviously want to first and foremost protect the seniors so that while they're on Medicaid, we have sufficient assets to make sure the spouse is taken care of, but also sufficient assets to pay for things that maybe Medicaid's not paying for. I mean, maybe we're going to have, the spouse out of town for a couple weeks seeing grandkids. Well, we want to be able to hire an aide to go in and check, or a care manager to go and check on the individual in a nursing home. And, have maybe pay for a private room, since Medicaid typically only pays for a shared room. So there's things that can be done with these funds to give a better quality of life for that individual. And so, talking about preserving, something for the legacy for the kids and grandkids, making sure we have enough money to take care of both of them while they're alive. And the educational part of that is important, so that they understand, everybody's on the same page with the family. Like, okay, we can kind of eliminate the myths out there, and understand that everybody can walk away from this saying, okay, we can handle this if it's needed. And, there are very good options that we can implement. And realizing that Florida is not like the other states, that we have really good options, and they just need to be proactive in making sure we have the flexibility and authority to implement things as we need to through their estate planning documents.
And when someone comes into your office for help with
Mhm.
Medicaid planning, asset protection, what does the first meeting look like? What do they bring with them? What should they expect? And then action plan for them. What are kind of the first few steps you suggest that they take right away?
Well, what it's going to look like for them, if they were to call our office, they're going to be have a call with our intake individual that's going to kind of listen. Okay, what are the issues? Is there a crisis situation,
Mm.
or is there more of just, hey, I'm just gathering information and what kind of long term, discussion about things that we could do. So that's kind of the first thing. And typically, if it's a crisis situation, then they're going to get in very quickly with my Medicaid paralegal to have an intake meeting, right? So that she can collect information from them, explain our process, and so forth, so that we can see if this is a good fit, if the client feels comfortable with us, if we feel comfortable with the client. And so there is that first intake meeting. At that intake meeting with the paralegal, they want to bring in the basic financial information, right? The income, the assets, any kind of a transfer history, bring those initial or those current estate planning documents with them. And so that they can have that general informational exchange. And then my paralegal, Kathy, and I are going to have a subsequent meeting the next morning to talk through that and see if it's something that we can help them with. Now, if it's a client that's looking more from a pre-planning standpoint, then they're going to be meeting with me, because it's a bigger discussion about some of those irrevocable trust planning and so forth. But regardless, if somebody's coming in, we always want them to gather the relevant financial information, the current estate planning documents, to the extent they have access to them. Um, they need to have that meeting with a reputable elder law attorney. I hope that's me, to understand, the basics of the programs, the basics of the financial criteria, and also the planning options. And then I really always take a good look at their estate planning documents. Okay. And that's the first thing I would say. Even if Kathy had an intake meeting with them, I want to look at those estate planning documents and say, Kathy, I need to have a further discussion with them, because I'm concerned about the power of attorney, and here's why.
Mhm.
So it gives me an opportunity to take a look at those, and to kind of give them some solid advice about, hey, these are things we may not need to be doing something right now from a eligibility standpoint, but we've got to first get really good estate planning documents in place so that we don't have those limitations.